Yeah, that's like we know it take a little bit while, so like it's okay, a little bit delayed because we know it has damage. When it comes down, the quality has seen like a bit high. Just that for good storage. So nothing really that big. Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Have a good weekend.
Yeah.
Hello, are we actually live yet? Sorry about that if I am not actually talking yet in this. I am actually doing this on my own today, so sorry about that. Let me close my door. So everybody, welcome to another Friday live session. Hopefully you are all hearing me. The first thing to take care of today is our sticker giveaway. So if you would like some of these Alex on Auto stickers, they are free. I do apologize because this is still the batch where the logo is ever so slightly crooked on the sticker. So sorry about that one, but again, they are free. What to do for one, you need to send me a postage prepaid self-addressed envelope. So you put your address here, stick a stamp on it, stick that in an envelope, and then there is an address in the description of this video, DykLaine LLC, Alex and Autos, the P.O. Box number there. Then you put that in the post box, and eventually a sticker will head back your way. So first topic was folks were asking what we usually film videos with. So a lot of our latest videos are shot with this guy right here, which is the new Sony a7 III. I have a love-hate relationship with this particular camera because it is big, it's not really that video focused, but it does a good job capturing highlights and lowlights, especially in mixed lighting, so that's why we use it. You can also do XLR inputs for better audio there, and the battery life is actually pretty good, so that's what we use for that. I don't travel with this guy because it is kind of a pain to travel with, so we actually use some Sony camcorders to do our travel videos with. Next topic that folks wanted me to talk about is somewhat controversial here, and that is resale value. That's something that I get asked about a great deal, and I know that a lot of you are frequently upset when I say that resale value isn't the biggest factor to a lot of shoppers, because it's frankly true, especially if you take a look at more expensive vehicles. So the more expensive the vehicle you're shopping for, the more likely it is to be leased. In fact, by the time you have reached BMW 5 Series segment, regardless of manufacturer, Lexus GS, to a large extent Lexus ES as well, BMW 5 Series, Audi A6, etc., the vast majority of these cars are actually leased, over 50%. And at that point, resale value just doesn't matter at all because you're paying on the lease. The lease is defined by the manufacturer, sometimes they're subsidizing it, etc. But that's really what you're doing there, is you're just paying that particular lease price. So whether the lease is subsidized by the manufacturer or not, it doesn't matter as long as it's the price tag that you're looking for. The only real area where resale value is a critical component of a car purchase decision is if you plan on not leasing, but you're only going to keep the car between, say, 3 and 5 years, because that's really the area where resale value is highly variable from one model to the other. And if that was the most important consideration to you, then you should buy a Jeep Wrangler or a Toyota Tacoma and basically nothing else, because a Toyota Tacoma will have 62% of its original value left at that mark, which is absolutely incredible. It's a very, very good resale value figure there, only rivaled by the Jeep Wrangler, which is right around 60 as well. Now, if you're in, say, a family sedan category, how much is going to be left? That's actually quite a bit less. So if you were to buy a Honda Accord or a Toyota Camry or a Subaru Legacy, then according to ALG, you'll be right around 34% of the vehicle's original value after 5 years. So it's quite a big split between Wrangler and Tacoma, and then Accord, Camry, and Subaru Legacy. Now you might be thinking to yourself, okay, but some of these metrics like, say, Consumer Reports or Edmunds will sometimes show that a Subaru Legacy has a few percent better resale value than a Camry or an Accord. Doesn't that make it a better value overall? Well, at this point, I also have to say that resale value isn't everything, because if you take a look at the bigger picture here, a Subaru Legacy is expected to cost you about $2,000 to $4,000 more in terms of overall fuel cost and, of course, maintenance and repairs, because there's simply more to go wrong with that Legacy. It's not quite as reliable overall as the Toyota Camry. So even though the Camry may have lower resale value than the Legacy, long run, it actually could cost you more if you're in that window. And then we fall into the last bucket here, which is folks that keep their cars 7, 8, 9, 10 years or so. And remember that the average owner in the United States keeps their car over 7 years this year. They're expected to actually keep their cars almost closer to 10 years these days. And if that describes your situation, then resale value isn't going to matter much either, because over that window, there's not a great deal of variation among cars either. So even if you had a Toyota Tacoma and you've put 150,000 miles on it over 10 years, you may have a slightly better resale value than, say, a Chevy Colorado, but the delta is not going to be enormous over that period. And again, at that point in time, things like overall cost of repairs and fuel economy especially are going to be bigger hits on your pocketbook. So with that out of the way, let's dive on over to our questions. So let me take a quick look here at this. Pardon our slight disruption here. I don't have a camera person helping me out, so it is going to be a little bit disjointed today. Someone is asking what my favorite automatic transmission is. I would divide this into two categories, maybe actually even three perhaps. So all in, my absolute favorite transmission has got to be the ZF 8-speed automatic, and that's why we see it in luxury cars all over the world. You know, Rolls-Royce, Bentley, Jaguar, Audi, BMW, all the big names there all use the ZF 8-speed automatic transmission from Germany. It's actually kind of interesting. There aren't that many companies that really make automatic transmissions anymore. Far more companies out there make cars than transmissions. The big names in the industry are, of course, the big three American auto manufacturers, specifically General Motors and Ford, who have been cooperating with their transmission development lately. So the latest 10-speed automatic transmission from GM and Ford is the same design, and that's used all across their lines. From the heavy-duty pickup truck line, we're seeing that same basic 10-speed automatic in the Ford Super Duty, the Chevy Silverado, and GMC HD trucks. Even though they're calling it an Allison transmission, it is actually the same GM design. They've licensed the Allison name, but Allison did not design the transmission. They validated the transmission and then allowed them to license the name. Excellent transmission, and actually there's really nothing wrong with this process, to be perfectly honest. Then from that point on, Chrysler doesn't make transmissions anymore. They license their transmissions from ZF. They may build some, but they don't design them anymore. The next big one, of course, is Aisin. They're partially owned by Toyota, effectively controlled by Toyota, and they make everything for the Toyota Group, the Lexus Group. They make transmissions for General Motors, for FCA. Some of the European brands use Aisin transmissions. Volkswagen, for instance, uses a lot of Aisin transmissions. Then we have ZF of Germany again, making for all those luxury brands. Mercedes makes their own, and then Jatco makes transmissions as well for Nissan and some select other OEMs. The Hyundai Kia Motor Group does their own. They're shared between those brands, and that's almost it, really. So in that window, I would say ZF is my favorite. I've rambled on here a little bit. ZF is my favorite. I would say that as far as dual-clutch transmissions go, the new Audi dual-clutch transmissions are absolutely excellent. There are some definite downsides. They require more frequent fluid changes than traditional automatic transmissions, and that is a bit of a bummer, about every 40,000 miles or so. And then if we're talking about front-wheel drive transmissions, I have to say that it's a narrow win at the moment for the Aisin 8-speed, which is what we find in Toyota Lexus products, Volvos, BMWs, Audis, etc. that are front-wheel drive. They're all using the Aisin 8-speed automatic. It definitely is smoother than the ZF that we find from Germany, the ZF 9-speed. And it also is smoother than the Hyundai Kia Motor Group 8-speed automatic that they're using in their latest products. Let's go on to our next question. Elfin is asking, what is our other job? I actually don't have another job. This is basically it. So we're depending on the revenue from all of you watching advertisements on this channel in order to support us. That kind of leads me to a side question here, which is how do we get paid? Alex and Autos makes all of its cash just from the YouTube advertising here, which we have no control over. So you turn on monetization, Google runs ads on Alex and Autos, and that's how we get paid every month. That's what supports me. That's what supports our editor. We do have an editor that assists with video editing here and is also filming the videos. And we accept no money from manufacturers directly. So if a manufacturer wants to advertise, they pay Google, Google pays us, but we have no idea who's advertising on our channel and absolutely no control over it. So let's see here, is Hyundai Sonata good? I actually really like the current generation Hyundai Sonata. I think that the biggest differentiator really between the core products in this group, and I would define that as the Altima, the Sonata, the Optima, and the Camry and Accord, those core group of products, the major difference there is personal taste and style. They're all very solid products. They all handle well. They all have reasonable acceleration. Now, some are definitely better than others. The premium in terms of overall acceleration and driving dynamics in this segment is, I think, a tie actually between the Accord and the Camry. We haven't really seen a Camry that's been this dynamic in a very, very long time, but the current generation really is. And then the Sonata's big selling point would be relatively good value in the low-end trims. It has a very low starting price relative to some of the competition. We also have a 2-liter turbo if that's the driving nature that you want rather than the V6 that we find in the Camry. And I like the overall interior style. It also has a very long warranty, so it has a lot of positive attributes. I think that in a number of ways the current generation Accord beats the current generation Sonata. And if I were shopping in this segment right now, if I wasn't getting a really great deal on the Sonata, I would probably buy the Accord, but it's hard to go wrong with that sedan right now. So let's move along here. Thoughts on the current generation CR-V's oil dilution problem? That is an interesting question, and it brings along something that we've talked about before here in our live streams, which is overall reliability metrics, and remembering not to get bogged down too much in forum talk and sort of anecdotal evidence. I try to think about objective evidence as far as it comes to reliability as much as possible. And in this particular area, I know that we have had some Honda engines with problems. Those numbers have been borne out in Consumer Reports data, data from True Delta, data from JD Power, etc. But it does not appear to be a hugely widespread problem. And this is where I say it's important to remember the numbers here. So Honda sells a ton of engines. In fact, at this point in time, Honda probably has the highest volume turbocharged engine in the United States, the 1.5-liter turbo. They're selling hundreds of thousands of those a year. In fact, Honda is selling more of those 1.5-liter engines than BMW sells of any engine in the United States, or actually even in the world if you're taking a look at worldwide figures. So if we're taking a look at that and we're saying there are a few thousand cars out there that have a problem, it's not really a big percentage of the overall sales. So that is a little bit of a tricky thing right there. But again, it does appear that there is a problem that has been identified in some cars. We don't know how prevalent it is, and we don't know exactly what that's going to mean long-term for reliability. Now, if you're thinking long-term reliability and that's the most important thing to you, then I would probably steer away from any turbocharged engine, because the numbers say that even though turbos are generally speaking quite reliable, there is simply more to go wrong in a turbocharged engine versus a naturally aspirated engine. So if you're looking for absolute long-term longevity, then a naturally aspirated engine is going to be your win there. Let's move on here. Is the CX-5 the best SUV? That is a tricky question. It's the one that I like the most in that segment at the moment, but there are always going to be caveats. What I like the best may not be the best fit for you in your particular situation, so I would keep that in mind. If I were looking at lower-end models, I would actually say the Honda CR-V is one of my absolute favorites in this segment. It's just a very, very well-rounded crossover. It's probably the one that I would recommend the most to friends or family that are shopping. I love the way the CX-5 drives, and I love the new turbocharged engine, but you can only get the turbo in the high-end trims. And that's sort of the big thing for me with the CX-5. Also, the interior is not as spacious as some of the alternatives, so that's the main reason that I would tell people to really think hard before they bought a CX-5 would be decide how much of that space you want. But but the CX-5 is absolutely the best looking entry in this segment at the moment, in my opinion. What do we think of the new Volkswagen GLI? I really like the looks of the GLI, and I have to say that I like it a little bit more than the GTI. I like the new look up front versus the GTI. I like the fact that we get basically the same sort of options and feature set that we find in the GTI in sedan form. I am a little bit partial to the overall style of a sedan, although I have to say if there was a Jetta wagon GLI, then I might be more interested in the wagon because I do like wagons. Peter's asking about our initial thoughts with the Kia Telluride and when we might be able to do a full review. So we will be driving the Telluride in Colorado. As I understand it, we are going to be driving to Telluride, of course, in March. So I believe it is the second week of March. The review should follow very shortly thereafter. There may or may not be an embargo on that, so we may have to hold the review for a few days, but it's definitely going to be around that second week or so. My initial thoughts on it are that I'm surprised the fuel economy is competitive, so that's my first big thought. Kia and Hyundai have really been working hard to improve their overall fuel economy numbers, and the Telluride numbers are comparable to the Honda Pilot, even though it's bigger. I think it is going to be a very good and attractive option to an alternative to the Volkswagen Atlas. So if you've been looking at an Atlas, or if you've been looking at some of those other larger vehicles in this segment, perhaps a Nissan Pathfinder, but you're interested in something that has higher reliability, then it's going to be an excellent option. The Telluride and, of course, the related Hyundai Palisade. Honda and Toyota don't have anything in this particular subsegment. The Highlander and the Pilot may seat 8, but they're just not as large on the inside as the Traverse, the Palisade, the Pathfinder, and the new Telluride. So if you're looking for that next size category up, then you may not have too many options other than that smaller subset right there. The CX-9 slots somewhere in between. It's overall not as practical on the inside as many of the larger vehicles. It actually is a little bit closer to, say, the Pilot and the Highlander in terms of overall interior accommodations. So definitely excited about it. It looks like it's going to be relatively rugged as far as three-row crossovers go. Keep in mind it's not a Jeep, it's not a Chevy Tahoe. It is still a unibody crossover, but it looks like they've checked all the boxes. They'll have an all-wheel drive system where you can lock the center coupling. They'll have a fairly powerful 3.8-liter V6, overall decent fuel economy, etc. So let's see here. Honda Pilot or Subaru. This is kind of a tricky one for me. I like the Subaru in terms of overall base value. It is an incredible bargain. Decent fuel economy, standard all-wheel drive, high level of standard equipment in the base model. The only thing that bugs me about the Subaru is that we don't have any mechanism to keep child seats latched into the second row and then still hop into the third row easily. Now, we don't see that either in the Honda Pilot, but getting in the back is a little bit easier in some of the alternatives in this segment, like the Volkswagen Atlas, the Nissan Pathfinder. Both the Pilot and the Ascent have this same particular problem. Now, I do have a quick video where I compare some of the basic details between those two vehicles on our channel, so I would encourage you to go check that particular one out. I would say if you're looking for the more fun-to-drive option, the faster option, that would be the Honda Pilot with the 9-speed automatic transmission and the torque vectoring rear axle. If you're looking for the best deal, that would probably be the Subaru Ascent, although it is worth noting that right now the Subaru Ascent is selling like hotcakes, so it may be tricky to find one without a dealer markup. Let's see here. Which would you pick, a base UX 200 or a loaded Kia Soul? I would personally get the loaded Kia Soul in the new 2020 version, which is actually going to be on sale in about 2 to 3 weeks, we're told. You will be able to get the turbo model right away. The turbo model is significantly faster than the UX, and it's an awful lot more fun. It handles better, it is faster. It's not quite as fuel efficient, but the delta is not enormous. It also has actually a longer warranty than the Lexus, go figure. And interior parts quality is not where the Lexus is, but it's actually pretty good for the mainstream segment. So I would say it depends on exactly what you're looking for in your next vehicle. The Lexus isn't available with leather. It looks like the new Kia Soul is not going to have leather on the inside either. They're both going to be imitation leather. If that's a box you want to check, you should look elsewhere. But I think other than that, overall space efficiency, overall roominess, etc., is actually better in the Soul, as is driver comfort. Let's move on here. Are we going to review the 2019 Yaris IA? we probably will eventually, but the current Yaris IA video that we have on our channel, actually the Scion IA video, still applies to the current generation Yaris IA. And that is that I like, it's basically a Mazda 2. So if you want a Mazda 2 sedan in the US, you buy the Yaris IA. And that's actually a really great pair-up, I think. I wish that Toyota and Mazda would do more products together, actually, because the Toyota dealer network is better than the Mazda dealer network. It's larger, it's easier to find, etc. Toyota's pricing model tends to be a little bit simpler than what we've seen from Mazda's pricing model. And then the car itself is great to drive. It's a fun car, it's well apportioned. So I think it's a good pair-up, those two together. So I like that in that particular segment. If you're looking for good value, that's definitely there. If you're looking for something a little bit off the beaten path, we don't have too many options these days. You'd have to go into something like Honda Fit, which is fun, but I think actually not as fun as the IA. The Kia Rio is still in that segment, which is a little bit more traditional. So, you know, keep that in mind. Let's move on here. What are all the cars you have owned? That's an interesting question. Let's see. I started out inauspiciously with a 1988 Ford Aerostar. That was a very, very used minivan in college. Then I had a 1997 Eagle Vision, which I strangely loved. Never had too many problems with my Eagle. I always wanted to turn it into a convertible. I thought it would look really great if I whacked its roof off, but I never got that far. Then I single-handedly reduced the average age of the Chrysler LHS buyer in 2000 with a new 2000 LHS. I put a ton of miles on that one. I put 160,000 miles on it in 3 years. Drove absolutely everywhere, never had a problem with that one either. I think if I think back about cars that I miss, I strangely miss my LHS the most, I think, of all the new cars I've had. It was enormous. The thing was a whale. And looking on it now, sedans have shrunk so much that even an extended wheelbase Mercedes-Benz S-Class is about the same size as my Chrysler LHS was, but doesn't have the same kind of interior room that LHS did. And the trunk was huge. Let's see here. Then after the LHS, I had, or concurrently, I had a Volvo S70 T5. 98, 99? The years are slipping up in my head there. Then I had a 2000 GMC Envoy, a 2006 Volvo V70R, a 2009 Saab 97X Aero, a 2016 Kia Soul, which is going back on its business lease. It's the company car here. That we use to drive around and take stuff everywhere. That lease is up in June of this year, so we haven't decided what it's going to be replaced with. And then we have a 2018 Dodge Durango Citadel all-wheel drive anodized platinum, which is the longest, silliest name I can think of right now. And I'm told that it also is ridiculous because it's not chemically possible to anodize platinum. At any rate, that is so far the automotive history. Let's see here. Do we have an ETA for the full review on the 2019 RAV4 Hybrid? Not yet. We are told that we might be able to get our hands on one in about a month. And we are also told that the hybrid model will be on sale at the end of March, possibly early April. So that's about the same time frame that we were told last year when Toyota released the RAV4 at its launch event. It's being built in their factory in Japan, as I recall, and because of the overall design of the system and the fact that Toyota is trying to crank out more hybrids than ever before, they're a little behind on production. So they deliberately staggered the production of the RAV4 that way. So we should be seeing it soon. Nero is asking, what do I think about Honda's new 9-speed transmission shift quality and reliability? I'm going to split that question into two because I'm not sure if you mean the ZF 9-speed automatic that Honda uses or Honda's own 10-speed automatic transmission design. They're very, very different. The 9-speed that Honda and Acura uses, that's the same transmission that we find under the hood of the Land Rover Evoque, Land Rover Range Rover Evoque, the Jaguar E-Pace, FCA's products like the Jeep Cherokee, Jeep Renegade, Chrysler 200, etc., Nissan, Chrysler Pacifica, and a number of other products from Europe that use the ZF 9-speed automatic transmission. Honda's 10-speed automatic is an entirely different design. It was done entirely in-house. It has no relation at all to the ZF 9-speed automatic transmission. And I really love the Honda 10-speed automatic. I hope that that makes its way into other products soon. If we're talking about the ZF transmission, then this is a tricky one. Shift quality, not my favorite. Shift behavior, not my favorite either. Actual reliability problems, we haven't actually seen a reliability issue, I would say, in the ZF 9-speed. There are a ton of complaints, but when you really boiled the complaints down, it's people complaining about shift quality. And because of the overall design of the 9-speed automatic transmission, the shift quality is really never going to improve. In fact, I'm amazed that it's as good as it actually is. We've talked about this before. I have a specific video on my channel where we go into great detail on that. But in a nutshell, the ZF 9-speed is the only production transmission in the world that uses a positive displacement clutch. So it's a toothed clutch. Basically, think of big gears like this that have actual teeth on them, and you have to mesh the teeth together. So think about this conceptually. You're driving down the road. The transmission wants to go from gear 5 to gear 6, so it means it has to engage or disengage a clutch. So to do this, the transmission shifts to neutral. One side is spinning because you're rolling down the road. The wheels are making it move. Then the transmission has to adjust the engine speed exactly to get these teeth to mesh perfectly. Then it can re-engage power to the wheels. That's exactly what's going on inside the ZF 9-speed twice as you go from gear 9 to 1 or 1 to 9, either direction. And that's a very complicated process. So I'm actually really impressed that it's as smooth as it is, but it's always going to feel different than a frictive clutch, which is what other transmissions use. And it's also going to take longer than a traditional transmission shift. And that's why in the ZF 9-speed, as you're downshifting especially, this is most noticeable. So though, as you're going down, some transmission shifts feel very normal, and then some feel like the transmission's gone into neutral for a moment, because the transmission has gone into neutral basically for a moment. So you don't get engine braking for this moment, and it feels strange as you want to decelerate, and then all of a sudden it engages and you're okay on the other side. So that behavior is unlikely ever to get perfect in that transmission just due to its overall design. But actual reliability hasn't been a particular problem. Let's move on. Someone's asking what this drink is. This is actually coconut milk. Let's see here. What do we think of the 2019 Optima SXL? I like the Optima. I like the overall style. I also like the 2-liter turbo. It's not as fast as Honda's Accord, though. So if you're after the optimum in performance, that would be the Accord. If you're looking for the optimum in overall reliability, I would actually say at this point in time, it could likely be the Optima, because Optima has proved very reliable. Kia's overall reliability scores have actually been beating some of the mainline Japanese brands lately. Same with Hyundai over there. And Kia and Hyundai have been a little bit more conservative in their power figures with that engine and the overall transmission design. It has a long standard warranty as well. Let's see here. What's the deal? We hear today about the Ford MPG scandal on the Ranger. I actually was surprised by that, because the last time we drove the Ranger, we were really impressed with its overall fuel efficiency scores. Now, we don't know all the details yet. All we know is that Ford, in their own internal testing, said that they may have misreported or mistested some of things that they were reporting. Remember that with fuel economy, manufacturers self-test. This is part of why we occasionally have these MPG scandals going on. The EPA does not test every vehicle out there. And the EPA does not test every trim level either. Manufacturers aren't even required to test every trim level. So we don't know whether it was a simple error, etc. We do know, however, that Ford caught it. Ford reported it themselves. They self-reported. Nobody caught Ford or anything like that. So we'll find out soon. It could just be a simple restatement of perhaps 1 or 2 miles per gallon, but in our testing, it actually did achieve the overall EPA scores. So we'll find that out soon. Why do EV owners not consider the $12,000 battery replacement cost to be maintenance? The simple answer to that would be actual battery replacements seem to be infrequent with EVs, especially if we're talking about newer EVs that have active cooled or active heated battery packs. like we see in the Chevy Bolt, for instance. And battery warranties would likely cover that for the traditional lifetime of an electric vehicle. Remember that as batteries wear, as the vehicle gets older and batteries wear, it's not that the battery pack is likely to fail at 100,000 miles. All the research that has been out there done on batteries indicate that they're very reliable, and that just over time, the overall actual maximum capacity of the battery starts to go down. Now, the amount of capacity loss that you see over time depends on a number of different factors. It depends on how the battery pack was designed, its overall chemistry, how the battery pack was cared for, how you used it in your particular use situation, etc. But we do see a lot of Teslas out there, tons of Teslas, very well managed battery pack when it comes to heating and cooling, long battery pack lifetimes as far as we've seen there. So I don't think it's a huge thing to worry about for the average EV owner in America. And remember that a lot of EVs are also leased. So this is also another little twist in there. EV lease rates are very, very high. So if you're looking at an EV and you're worried about that and you're leasing it, don't worry about it. If you're buying one or if you're buying a used EV, this may be a concern. But again, you'd have to look at your particular use case there. So let's see here. Let's see here what else. When will we review the new 2019 BMW 3 Series? I do not know yet, actually. That is a really good question. Hopefully in the next month or two. What are my thoughts on the Genesis G90? I would wait till the value. How much the brand is worth to you really is a personal choice. But I would say that the G90 compares very, very well against the Lexus LS. Overall equipment inside the cabin, overall luxury feel, etc. may fall behind the European entries. But remember that the G90 is significantly less expensive. So it's not going to have all the gadgets and goodies that a Mercedes-Benz S-Class has in it. But the G90 actually is almost half as expensive. The Mercedes S-Class realistically starts at around $120,000 or so by the time you've put the basics on the car that most people will want. You can get a fantastically expensive, fantastically comfortable Mercedes. I really like the S-Class. It's superb to drive. But is it worth almost double the G90? That's a trickier question. Moving along here, let's see. We have... when we'll be reviewing the 2019 Elantra GT N-Line? That is a good question. I don't actually know the answer to that. It has not arrived locally yet. So hopefully the next few months would be my best guess on that. When are we releasing a review of the 2020 Corolla sedan? Look for that on Tuesday. Tuesday morning we will have two separate reviews, one on the gasoline-only model and one on the hybrid model. We did not have the opportunity, unfortunately, to drive the base 1.8-liter engine, but that's going to be basically the same as the previous generation Corolla. They just took the engine out of the LE Eco, jammed it under the hood, so don't expect anything too different there. Have we heard about the new Lincoln Corsair? I have. What are my thoughts? I've always liked the MKC. I like the fact that the MKC is the only compact luxury crossover in that segment that is thinking outside the box. And by that I mean that if you drive the Cadillac XT4, the Volvo, well actually the Volvo XC60 is a little bit different too, but the mainline entries, the Q5, X3, GLC, the Stelvio, the RDX, etc., they're all trying to be the absolute sportiest entry. The suspensions are definitely firm, they have a solid European feel to them, etc., all that sort of thing. But then if we look at the MKC, especially if you get the adaptive suspension, it has a very, very soft ride. Some may complain that it's too floaty, too wallowy, too boaty, but I actually like the fact that there is still a car that you can buy that has a comfortable suspension tune, even if it is a crossover. And I'm hoping that Lincoln continues that with the MKC, because there are a lot of folks out there that write in and ask about wanting a car or a crossover or an SUV with a comfortable ride, and that's one of the only options that you can get in that price category. Moving along, let's see here. What best third-row SUV in terms of third-row space, both luxury and non-luxury? Third-row space, that would be best in something like the Volkswagen Atlas, the Pathfinder, The Traverse is not bad in terms of legroom, but headroom does get cut off really strangely by the overall shape of the rear passenger and cargo area back there. The new Telluride, Palisade are good as well. And that whole group there is actually about the same in terms of overall headroom as full-size SUVs. So if we're looking at the Armada, the QX80, the Tahoe, the Suburban, the Navigator, the etc., that segment of SUVs is not necessarily going to have that much more room in the rear for the third row passengers. If you absolutely want the best third row, then you're pretty much in minivan land, to be honest. Emailed Subaru about making a full-size pickup truck. Would you tell them to do that? I would. I could always tell them to do that. They're probably not likely to do that because of overall fuel economy regulations and the fact that Subaru is a fairly small company. So remember, in companies have to make a lot of decisions when building products. It has to be reliable, it has to be cost-effective, it has to be profitable. It's probably the biggest one. And that's really why we haven't seen pickup trucks from many other companies. The segment is so dominated by the American companies, and we've seen companies like Toyota and Nissan try their best to try and put a truck in that full-size segment or even the compact segment, and they just don't move anywhere. That's why we see such an old design in the Toyota Tacoma and the Toyota Tundra. Even though the Tacoma sells relatively well, even the Ram outsells it by 4-to-1 practically. So we're probably not going to see too many pickup trucks that are new. There's always the hope that Volkswagen might bring theirs. There's this constant hope that Hyundai might try with something, but don't expect their sales to just sort of leap off the page right away. Let's see here. Hi, Alex. Odyssey versus Sienna. Which one to buy? Really can't decide. I would Odyssey all the way over the Sienna. The Sienna is definitely old at this point in time. But I would also say that if you're looking for simply the best minivan, it would be probably the Chrysler Pacifica for many folks. I know that everybody's always on the, oh, what about reliability, etc. Remember, the Pacifica has the same 9-speed automatic transmission as the Odyssey does. So if you're worried about transmission reliability, they're identical. Unless you get the top-end Odyssey, which gets the 10-speed automatic transmission. But in terms of overall practicality, the Pacifica is just better at the core minivan things like child friendliness, cargo capacity, practicality, etc. The second row seats fold flat into the floor, something that you can't do in the Odyssey. You have to take them out. They're a lot heavier. If you get the top-end trims of the Odyssey where the seats slide around and move around, then there are huge humps left in the floor. So if you're trying to push cargo items into the vehicle, you have to actually have someone else up front to lift them up out of the way and onto that hump. It's not as practical cargo-wise. There's no hybrid. You can get a hybrid in the Pacifica, which will give you 50% better fuel economy, etc. In this particular segment, I would actually say that the reason the Pacifica sells so well and and the reason that Chrysler outsells Honda in the minivan segment by a long stretch is that their minivans are just very, very practical. Let's move along here. Which is the best all-wheel drive system? That is a really tricky question because there are so many different all-wheel drive systems out there. Grouping them together functionally, the luxury rear-wheel drive, all-wheel drive systems are all identical. So, Audi Quattro, BMW, Mercedes, Alfa Romeo, Jaguar, etc. Functionally, the way the systems behave, they're all identical. The only real difference with the Audi system is that they jam the transfer case and the front differential into the same case as the transmission. But in terms of actually moving power around, etc., from a hardware level, they're all very, very, very similar. Then we get the next group of systems, which are the front-wheel drive systems, things that we will find in anywhere from a Ford Escape to a BMW X1 to a Mini to an Acura product, etc. Functionally, all very, very similar. The power is permanently connected to the front wheels. They can then connect and disconnect the rear wheels. And at that point, software is the biggest differentiator between the systems. And we really see that when you take a look at Jeeps, for instance. There are a lot of Jeeps, the compact Jeeps, that have physically the same style all-wheel drive system, but the software is tuned very, very differently. So it will direct power where it's needed rather than cutting power from the engine. It allows a lot more wheel slip. Or in that segment, we also have Acura's super handling all-wheel drive system, which can try and direct more power to the rear. We might have a video taking a more in-depth look into all-wheel drive systems at some point in time. So stay tuned for that one. Let's move along here. Do you know if the BMW 2 Series will get another generation? I'm sure that it probably will. We just don't know too much yet. Let's see here. Best company to deal with when dealing with press cars? Actually, I would say that they're basically all the same. Most manufacturers are very easy to deal with in terms of press car access. The only ones that get a little trickier are the ones that we generally don't cover for a variety of different reasons. So Porsche, the exotics, etc. Rarely discuss things with them because this channel, Alex and Auto, here we generally try and focus on mainstream vehicles, and well, Porsche does have a few vehicles that are entering into the mainstream, like the Macan is something that I really do want to get our hands on at some point, other than just quick drives from loaner vehicles from dealers, etc. But Porsche themselves is a little bit tricky to deal with. I'll just say that. Let's see here. Ford Edge or Nissan Murano, or Alfa Romeo Stelvio. I think that's what we're asking here. I would go with Stelvio over those. Definitely a lot more fun. Let's see here. Do we do our own video editing? I do some of my own video editing, and our editor also does some of our video editing. We're actually in a transition point where we hired a new editor. She's going to be starting in the next few weeks or so. Historically, I've done all the editing. Over the last year, we've been kind of trying to move that along so that we can do more videos and get more things out there. Let's see here. Best hybrid system in terms of geometry, efficiency, and reliability. That is a tricky one. So I would say this depends on the size and the style of vehicle you're looking at. Toyota by far makes some of the most reliable hybrid systems because of their overall design. But it is worth noting that the Chrysler front-wheel drive hybrid system that we find in the Pacifica, the Ford hybrid systems, and the General Motors hybrid systems all share basic design elements with the Toyota system. So in terms of overall reliability, all of those are actually very, very similar. In fact, the rumor mill has it, although it's been difficult to confirm this, that the Chrysler plug-in hybrid in the Pacifica is actually made by Aisin in the same factory that all of Toyota's hybrid drivetrains are made in. That system is very reliable simply because it has very few parts. Other hybrid systems that employ more traditional automatic transmissions are likely going to be slightly less reliable than that, but about as reliable as a traditional automatic transmission. And that would go for the Hyundai, Kia, BMW, Audi, etc. hybrids out there. And the new crop of Ford hybrids that we're seeing in their rear-wheel drive vehicles. Pardon me here. Now let's scroll down here. Do you think Hyundai will bring back the Genesis Coupe? They may bring back a coupe in the Genesis brand line, but it does not appear that they're going to bring back a coupe with a Hyundai logo on the front of it. Let's see here. Optima SXL or Kia Cadenza? I would actually say Cadenza. I prefer the overall size and the overall style of the Cadenza. I think it's also a decent value in that particular segment. When I'm reviewing the Mark II Tiguan, we actually already have a review up on our channel on that. Lexus Ambassador is asking if I have ever driven a Lexus LFA, and the answer is sadly no. I was invited to the launch event for the Lexus LFA back when the LFA was brand new, and very unfortunately, I had a scheduling conflict, and there was just no way that I could actually go and do it, and I have been perpetually sad ever since, because that would have been a ton of fun. Although on the bright side, I do understand that there was rain at the track, and so they couldn't actually drive the LFA on the track that day. So that made me feel just a teensy bit better, but I'm still sad. Let's see here. Ultima transmission failed after 62,000 miles, had to pay $5,000 to fix it. That is unfortunate. You might want to check with Nissan on that. I know that Nissan had some extended warranties on some of their CVTs due to some recalls, so it's always possible that they might help you with that, so it's worth asking. Have we heard of Fuely.com, user-reported mileage site they've used for years? I have. The only trouble with Fuely is that it is definitely very dependent on driving style. And remember that certain cars tend to collect certain kinds of people. So obviously the general driving style of someone that drives a Camaro or a Mustang is going to be very different than someone that drives a Prius. So the trouble with sites like Fuely is it's people that are, it collects a very specific demographic, people that are interested in fuel economy and this sort of specific demographic in particular vehicles. And that's why I think it's difficult to go with their numbers sometimes. And that's why we always do our own real-world fuel economy tests here as well. If you're looking at pickup trucks, we don't know whether the Fuely people were towing or not hauling or not hauling, how many people were in it, what was in it, etc. So it's hard to really look at those numbers and compare. Similarly, if you're looking at crossovers that have a high towing demographic, for instance, Dodge Durangos, one of the biggest selling reasons for Dodge Durango buyers in independent metrics is their ability to tow. That's the reason that I bought a Durango. And that's the reason that I bought a Durango, but the Durango is not necessarily the Alex on Auto's top pick in the three-row crossover segment because it's my pick for my specific use case, but not the generally recommended one. And my Durango spends most of its time with the trailer connected. So its fuel economy is going to be on average much lower than a Honda Pilot that never has a trailer connected. So it's hard to go with some of those metrics there. So just use the metrics and then really think about them before making a decision that way, I would say. So like to like, it could be very helpful. So Honda Accord to Toyota Camry, the shopper should be very similar. Driving styles on average are likely going to be similar, etc. But that's not necessarily going to be the case when, say, comparing a Volvo shopper to a BMW shopper. The driver is not going to necessarily be the same. Not going to be the same between a Prius and a Honda Civic either. So keep that one in mind. What about diesels in the North America market, like BMW, Mercedes, Audi? I don't think we're going to be seeing very many diesels in the US here very soon. They've really fallen out of favor all across Europe as well. The latest diesel scandals, some of the tougher nitrous oxide rules, especially regulations, not just in Europe, but actually in China and in the United States, especially California, have really disincentivized manufacturers from bringing more diesels out. That's probably why the Mazda diesel is so late. Mazda was trying to comply without doing a urea injection system. That really wasn't going to happen, so they had to sort of shift gears. And then we just have the overall diesel emissions drama, which has definitely turned customers off in the past. So overall diesel sales just seem to be very soft. And that's why BMW and Mercedes have said that they're never going to bring one to America again. And Volvo has actually also announced that they're not going to be designing any new diesel engines either. So they're really crossing those off their list in Europe as well. Let's see here. Best crossover for a family of big guys. I would say if you're larger folks should definitely look at the larger options here. So I know in this question you listed CR-V, RAV4, or Santa Fe or Murano. Santa Fe or Murano would be where I would go. I really like the Santa Fe actually right now, and the Ford Edge actually. And if you can get a good deal on it, the Blazer actually. I was really impressed with the Chevy Blazer at its launch event. It was almost un-Chevy. But that group of crossovers is going to be wider. It's going to give you more legroom and a little bit more cargo room than the next category down. Pricing on the Blazer, the Murano, and to some extent the Edge is definitely on the more premium side of that segment, whereas the Sorento and the Santa Fe are on the lower end of that segment. So the Santa Fe with the 4-cylinder engine is priced a little bit closer to RAV4 and CR-V, whereas the Blazer is priced more like a 3-row crossover. It just happens to be a big 2-row, if that makes sense. But remember that you're probably going to get a pretty good deal on the Chevy dealer lot in about the next 12 months or so. When the Blazer first goes on sale, likely it's going to be closer to MSRP, but over time, generally speaking, we see a better deal on the Chevy lot. Let's see here. New idea for an AOA shirt. All it has to say is an interesting twist. we'll think about that. I actually have been looking at t-shirt ideas, so you know, maybe you can comment on them down there in the comment section below. We have a lot of requests for things, but I'm not that creative, so hopefully our new editor will maybe think up of something. Tesla only started recently leasing. What about the secondary market for EVs with the expensive battery market lurking in the future? Actually, Tesla didn't just start leasing. Tesla just started leasing the Model 3. They had been leasing their other models. And for Tesla specifically, there's a reason that they weren't leasing. Internally, that is. Folks were able to lease with a third-party leasing company, but Tesla was not doing captive lease sales. The IRS, well, actually the SEC for Tesla, but basically the government agencies have changed the way that manufacturers get to report sales if the lease is an internal captive lease company. So if Tesla's leasing you a Model 3, BMW is leasing you a 3 Series, Mercedes is leasing you a C-Class, the way that they get to realize that income on their financials has changed. And therefore, it is a lot less advantageous for a company like Tesla to lease, because if all those Model 3s had been leased, they wouldn't have been able to realize the sale the way that they used to, and they would have been operating as a loss. I mean, we all know that Tesla is effectively operating as a loss, even though occasionally they have book profits, paper profits. But the real impact of that would have been much uglier financial statements for Tesla. So by not leasing and trying to get all those sales moved to purchases, they were able to realize all that revenue right away, have their financials look a little prettier, to get themselves in a better position where they could then restart leasing to then try and attract the people that wanted a Model 3 that would then lease one, and they could get more moved, if that makes sense. But still, on purchasing in long term, we have no evidence that after 10 years and 150,000 miles that you're going to need a new battery in a Tesla. Now that may be different in a Nissan Leaf. You know, we have seen Nissan Leafs, first generation Leafs, that had more battery degradation problems. That's why Nissan introduced their new battery warranty against capacity loss and failure, etc. But then in that situation, remember that you would be able to go and get that new battery right there towards the end of your battery warranty. You know, my Soul is at its on its 3rd year now, and we don't treat the battery like we really quote-unquote should. It's always 100% charged when we're not using it, so it's plugged in, it's always kept at 100% charge. We run it down with DC fast charged, etc. And according to its latest dealer report on capacity, it still has 98% of its original capacity left. So I'm really not hugely concerned about that. Let's see here. How do we feel about the Kia Telluride? We've already answered that one. We can rewind about the beginning here. Thoughts on the Audi RS5? I am a little torn on the RS5. It is definitely fast. It's definitely fun. I like the look outside of Audi products. On the inside, it's a little black. I wish that there were some more color variation there. But when it comes to absolute handling precision, the BMW and the Mercedes are going to be better. The Audi just has too much weight up front for my tastes. Now, they're really trying their best to try and work around that. And if you want all-wheel drive, it does have all-wheel drive, obviously. And we don't find that in all of the performance variants necessarily in that segment. But I would probably go with one of the other alternatives if it were me. Telluride or Palisade, that is a tricky one, and I don't know if I can answer that now. I like the exterior looks on the Telluride better than the Palisade, but I think that I like the Palisade's interior and top trims better, especially the one that Hyundai was showing at the LA Auto Show, I believe, in November, where it had a blue and cream interior. That interior really spoke to me, so I really like that one. So hopefully we'll be able to drive that soon. Hyundai, for some reason, doesn't ever invite us to launch events. Can't say why. So it's probably going to be a few months after we drive the Telluride that we'll drive the Palisade, even though theoretically the Palisade will be on sale first. So keep that one in mind. In the market for a hybrid vehicle, is the RX 450 the best in class? Other alternatives around 40K. Ooh, that is a tricky question. I mean, it's the only hybrid really in its class, so that is kind of a tricky thing. If you want a plug-in hybrid, then we have a few more options. And if I were shopping in that group, I would probably buy the Volvo plug-in hybrid, or wait for a BMW X5 plug-in hybrid before I bought the RX-50 because they're going to be more fun and definitely faster. The RX 450 is unquestionably going to be more reliable. So if you want a reliable, dependable, fuel-efficient luxury hybrid that you will probably never have to worry about, then that is going to be the RX 450 hybrid. That is really where it shines. On the downside, the all-wheel drive system is not as capable, so if you're going to take it to the snow, it's not going to perform like a traditional all-wheel drive system would. I would say get the RX 350 all-wheel drive if that is your situation. But it's not going to be as fast or as fun or necessarily as efficient as some of the European options. The XC60, I think, is a good alternative to that if you want something with more power. We're talking 400 horsepower with overall fuel economy that's pretty similar to the RX hybrid. Let's see here, move on. Kia Soul turbo transmission, someone is asking about that. It is still the 7-speed DCT, which I actually don't have a problem with. I know that some folks dislike dual clutch transmissions. I personally have no problem with them at all. Someone is asking, I want a 2020 Soul EV, I want to lease or finance my car. Will the $7,500 automatically come off since it is not my car? Yes, at the moment, with leases so far from the Hyundai Kia Motor Group, both companies have been doing the $7,500 lease right off the top of the purchase transaction. In that window, the leasing company gets the credit, you don't get the credit, but then they factor that into your lease deal. So yes, you will get that and it will affect your overall lease price. Any rumors for a mid-gate pass-through on any trucks on the horizon? Not that we have seen, not that I am aware of. So let's move on here again. You have that same sketchbook. I know this is what I use for notes when I'm videoing, so that way I don't get numbers wrong. I always put down our relative numbers here. Dodge Demon logo. Yes, that is a Dodge Demon logo back there. Someone sent it in at some point, so I stuck it on the wall. Any word on the new Alfa Romeo model that will be previewed in Geneva? I am not sure on that one. They've been really tight-lipped, and the only scuttlebutt that I have heard is that it's going to be either, which is not very helpful, either a concept-only car or a addition of an existing car. So I'm not sure what that will be. Do we sell any branded merchandise? Sort of. You can go to alexandautos.com, and I think that there is a link on the top of the website that has a link over to the AOA shop, and a company called Logo Sportswear will stick our logo on a ton of different stuff. We make no money off of that. That is all on them. They just happen to have our logo on file, and you can buy whatever you want, including the shirts that I wear when we're filming videos, etc. They are a little bit pricey, but we haven't really found a terribly great merch site that's easy to deal with. Hopefully that will change soon. Thoughts on the ILX? Is it better than a Civic Touring? I'm a little torn on the ILX. I wish it had a turbo engine. And I suspect that if I were shopping for one, I would buy the Civic Touring. It has the newer infotainment system. It has the turbocharged engine, which I prefer. On the downside, it does have the CVT, which I don't prefer. But it's going to be less expensive, so keep that one in mind. Let's see here. Moving right along. Do we know anything about the MDX 2020? I actually haven't heard anything there yet. Joel is asking, is the engine noise too loud in the RAV4 and RAV4 Hybrid, in my opinion? I actually was surprised by the engine noise in the RAV4. I'm thinking in my head, we will have one here very soon, actually, and we're thinking about buying one as a long-term review car. But in my head, if I recall correctly, the main thing with the RAV4 is that the engine noise just sounded a little unrefined compared to some of the competition. I don't think it was really that we heard that much more. It was sort of the way that it sounded was what seemed to bother some people there. But there are unquestionably some quieter cars in that segment. The Mazda CX-5, for instance, is definitely going to be quieter. Thanks for your emphasis on electric vehicle efficiency, something often overlooked by other reviewers. Thanks for that. It's good to know that some people are paying attention there. And I agree, it's kind of strange. And a lot of folks, I've met a lot of people, even in the industry, who, when you talk about electric vehicle efficiency, they'll have this quizzical look on their face and they'll say, well, what do you mean it's less efficient? And it's like, well, it's less efficient. I mean, I don't know what you mean. What do you mean it's less efficient? It takes more energy to go X number of miles. Therefore, it is less efficient. And for some reason, I know that there are a lot of folks out there that just think it's an electric car or it's a hybrid, so it must be overall efficient. But there are definite levels of efficiency in here, and this is an area where Tesla actually does extremely well. And it's not just in our tests or in the EPA testing. There have been a lot of independent testing where the I-Pace and the e-tron are 26 to 30% less efficient than corresponding Tesla models. So definitely something to keep in mind. We don't know what some of the new ones will be like. Someone here is asking about Chrysler Pacifica Hybrid. I actually covered that earlier. Reliability, I actually would not be too worried about it. Remember that the overall design of the Pacifica Hybrid system is identical to what we see in Toyota products. Rumor mill has it that the transmission is actually manufactured in an Aisin factory, which manufactures all of Toyota's hybrid products as well. Is it going to be as reliable as a Sienna? We don't really know. It's a little too young. But I would also stress that remember that the overall difference in reliability between a Chrysler product and a Toyota product at this point in time, in most metrics, is about one problem every 3 years or so. So, you know, twice the number of problems, yes, but what does that actually mean? It actually means theoretically one more problem in that window. A lot of cars are a lot more reliable than they used to be. Now, again, still generally speaking less reliable, but 50% better fuel economy is probably going to have a bigger impact on your wallet. Let's see here. Where do you think the comparison of Korean cars to Japanese cars will be in the next 5 years? Which class or type of car will Japanese makers have continued edge over Korean? That's an interesting question, and it is kind of an interesting thing to watch here, because I think that Honda and Toyota were surprised a little bit by the continued improvement that we see in the Korean brands. And that's actually one of the things, some people have said that, you know, oh, you like Kia or Hyundai too much. I'm probably more impressed with them than other auto manufacturers in a way, in the business sense. But I don't have a particular preference when we're there. As you can see, I've owned a very strange number of vehicles around, only one of which has been a Kia. But the rapidness, the rapidity that the change has happened at Hyundai and Kia is what astounds me. Kia, especially over the last 10 years, went from the ugliest, strangest, least reliable things on God's green earth to cars that are incredibly competitive. And the speed at which that's happened is what's impressive here. I mean, 10, 15 years ago, I would have only recommended a Kia if someone gave it to you, or if that was, you know, had to be some overriding reason, because it was just one of the worst things available in its particular segment. There weren't that many reasons to get one. But now you look at the lineup of Kia products, and they're good values, and they have long warranties, and their styling is generally attractive. They haven't made too many missteps when it comes to overall styling. The interiors are well appointed. And now finally they're also getting the driving dynamics in line. So we've seen this steady progress. You know, they really focused on dependability and reliability. Then they decided to move on to styling, so they fixed the styling problems. Then they moved on to interior quality and started really nailing down the interior quality issues that they had before. And then when that was done, they started dialing in on overall driving dynamics, which is the latest change that we've seen in their product line. And now overall efficiency as well. So it's really interesting to see their change over time. And as I've said before, fuel economy has never really been Hyundai and Kia's thing in America, but we're starting to see that change. But I would say that Honda has reacted very well to this, because we've seen Honda especially sharpening their focus on driving dynamics and, you know, fuel economy, interior style, interior quality at the same time, reacting to, I think, what we see in some of these other vehicles, which is why the Honda Civic is still my favorite compact sedan, and the Accord is still my favorite compact midsize sedan pick over the Korean options. Even as good a value as they are, I would take the Accord. But then in some segments, they don't necessarily do quite as well. Like when we start taking a look at some of the luxury products, that's where I think that the Japanese brands need to pay a little bit more attention. Acura especially leaves a little bit to be desired versus the new Genesis products that we see from Hyundai, and that's definitely something that they should be watching. Toyota has been a little slower in changing, but I think that they're starting to get there, especially on the value proposition. The Camry and the Corolla are very, very good values in their base models, and they're still definitely a solid choice. So let's move on here. Are we going to be reviewing the 2019 Yaris sedan? I don't know about that one, as I said earlier. We'll try and see how we can do that. Let's see here. Best sub $40,000 used 7-seater SUV, Q7 GLS, based on driving experience, luxury, etc. Sub $40,000. I would actually say it depends on how much you value reliability, obviously. But the BMW X5, which is a little smaller, or the Q7 are probably going to be the less expensive options to keep around. The GLS is probably going to be more expensive. But if you're really concerned about cost, I would strongly suggest looking at a new something like an Acura MDX, which could be a better value overall. Let's see here, moving along, we have trying to get all these questions out here before we go offline. Thoughts on the G70 compared to German competition? I think we actually have answered that pretty well in our videos. The G70 is a great value. It also, I think, is going to be more reliable and less expensive to keep around. Those are going to be its main selling points there versus the Germans. So if you're leasing the car and you're looking for the absolute fun, the Germans still have a slight edge here. But if you're going to be buying the car, I would definitely buy the G70. It's going to be less expensive to keep around, 99% as much fun, and a really good value overall. Let's see here. Thoughts between Passport and RDX, which one is the best to keep? I think that's an easy one. I would RDX all the time over the Passport. Passport has a little bit more room on the inside, but I would definitely get the RDX. XT4, XC40, CX5 Signature, best value for money. Value, it would be the CX5, obviously. It's less expensive and has a decent feature set. And then after that, it would be the XC40. I really liked the XT4, and that review is coming up here actually very soon. We should have that perhaps next week. The big thing with the XT4 is its price tag, which surprised me. The XT4 gets pretty expensive. In fact, the XT4 not only gets several $1,000s more expensive than the BMW X1, the XC40, the Q3, but it also manages to be more expensive than the new 2020 Range Rover Evoque. And the Evoque has generally been considered the premium entry in that particular little segment. So if you get a really good deal on an XT4, maybe, but otherwise the price tag is just a bit of a problem. Let's see here, Civic or Hyundai Elantra, what would I purchase? I would say it would be a tough choice between the Civic or the Ioniq. I would actually get the Ioniq over the Elantra, and here's why. The Ioniq is just less expensive to keep around. It actually also has a slightly better handling feel to it. Now, it's not going to be as fast as the Elantra, depending on especially which engine you get, but you're going to save hundreds of dollars of fuel a year. And if you get the top end trims of the Elantra, we have wide tires, and it actually has an independent rear suspension that we don't find in the Elantra, but we do find in the Honda Civic as well. So it doesn't handle quite as well as a Civic, but if we're looking at overall handling ability in this segment, and especially overall suspension dynamics, which I think is more critical to look at than absolute grip numbers, because you can fix grip aftermarket. If you put sticky summer tires on a 5-year-old Elantra, it's going to outhandle a stock Honda Accord, or Honda Civic rather. But like for like, brand new car, you take one car out, put summer tires on them to improve the overall grip. That's where suspension dynamics come more into play here. So the Elantra with summer tires on it versus an Ioniq with summer tires on it, the Ioniq is actually going to give you a slightly better handling feel overall. And it's also very practical. We have a huge cargo area, again, more fuel economy, etc. So that would be my pick there. Moving right along here, thoughts on Tesla Model 3 losing its recommended rating from Consumer Reports. I'm actually most shocked that Consumer Reports ever gave it a recommended rating in the first place. The reason there is that Tesla does very well at some things. Tesla, obviously high fuel efficiency. Their brand is definitely a big selling point for their vehicles. They're the only manufacturer out there that's giving us true long-range luxury electric vehicles at the moment. They have the supercharger network, which is very handy, not in the number of chargers, especially in metro areas, but in the way that they're located. So the innovation with Tesla here is that if you want to drive from Seattle to New York, you could just drive straight across the top of the US Superchargers are conveniently located all the way across. If you're driving anybody else's electric car, you'd have to go down to Denver and then across, because there just aren't supercharger or DC fast charger stations, rather, that are located up there in those other areas. But on the flip side, if you're living in an urban area, then you're actually going to find more SAE and more CHAdeMO stations and ports available than the competition, and more conveniently located in many ways than the Tesla charging network. So keep that part in mind. But as we've seen with Tesla, overall reliability and overall build quality has never really been a Tesla hallmark, so it doesn't surprise me. I mean, to be perfectly honest, you will never see any other auto manufacturer delivering vehicles with flaws in the paint the way that we see Tesla's paint spots that are thin, mismatched interior panels, poor build quality, hand reworked component. You just don't see that. Nobody else does that. But on the flip side, Tesla does do a good job at making their customers happy, which is why we see such high customer satisfaction rates from Tesla. So those flaws are in your Tesla. They will fix them. The ultimate question is, why were they there to begin with? That's why it lost its rating. Anyway, moving along. Let's see here. Ford Edge Sport all-wheel drive. What's the reliability? I would direct you to some of the metrics out there. The Ford Edge has been fairly average in terms of overall reliability overall. Soul and Niro EV, fastest possible charging times. What is required for such charging infrastructure? The Soul and the Niro will charge at 72 to 74 kilowatts maximum, which is slower than the current Tesla product lineup. So the current Teslas, I believe, will charge around 120 kilowatts, so almost twice as fast. They'll gain range about twice as fast as well, because their miles per kilowatt hour are really quite similar, in the 3.8 to 3.9 miles per kilowatt hour range. The big thing to know is that at the moment, there are not very many SAE fast charge stations that can charge that fast. For instance, in my local area, there is one that's nearby. All the others will charge at 50 kilowatts, so your charging speed will be a little bit slower. The number of connectors is higher than we find in the supercharger network, but the capability is not quite there yet. It's a massive infrastructure project to do this, though, because when we're talking about charging rates of 150 kilowatts, 200 kilowatts, 300 kilowatts, these are incredibly high demand loads on the electrical system. So you aren't going to find these charging stations in your average residential neighborhood. You're going to find them in industrial, commercial locations, etc., where the infrastructure is there to support that. But we are seeing build-outs at a pretty fast rate for those newer charge connectors. There have been a number of new ones announced near where I am. The network actually that's going to probably be slower to respond is for the new Leaf E Plus, because Nissan is still using their CHAdeMO standard, which everybody else has abandoned other than Mitsubishi and Nissan. And of course, Nissan now has purchased Mitsubishi, so they're probably going to stick with it. But everybody else has moved on to a different standard. So it's probably going to take longer to see those faster charging rates on the Leaf E Plus. Moving right along here, upper level CX-5, RAV4, Forester, or CRV. If you're looking for a top-end trim in that category, CRV, I think that the RAV4 just doesn't feel quite as premium. It's not as fast. We don't get the turbo. That's a big differentiator. Forester, also, we don't get the turbo. And the overall quality and value starts to fall a little bit when compared against those other high-end trims. And the CRV, although I think is very well-rounded, again, it doesn't have the turbo, the faster turbo, a more powerful turbo that we find in the Mazda. Scooting along here, 2019 ILX, Telluride, let's see, let's scoot along to some more recent questions here. Honda Fit Type R with an STI-sized roof-mounted wing and factory anti-lag. Oh, that's interesting. I don't know if I would pay that much for that, but okay. 2020 Kia Soul LX back seat, does it fold down 60/40? It does. So they all get a 60/40 seat. What do I think of the reliability of the Dodge Durango RT? The Durango has been a little bit below average in terms of overall reliability, but again, still not a huge delta between it and many of the competitors in that segment. Overall reliability delta between it and the Honda Pilot, for instance, is not enormous, but still statistically lower. So do keep that one in mind. Thoughts on the X2 M35i? I'm really interested in the X2 actually, because up until this point, strangely enough, the Volvo had been beating BMW in acceleration and handling performance, and now we have the X2 M35, which is going to solve that problem by jamming more power and more grip under there. So I am always interested in that sort of battle. I think that's really going to be an interesting thing there. I want a Genesis, but there's no Genesis dealership around me to buy one. Yes, that is definitely a problem. In fact, there are no Genesis dealers in California yet. As I've said this before, the problem with Genesis was that Hyundai wanted to shrink the number of Genesis dealers. So Hyundai is setting Genesis up to be Lexus, basically. They wanted to reduce the number of dealers because there were over 1,000 dealers that could sell Genesis products. And that's not sustainable. It's too many dealers for such a small volume car. They also wanted to be able to improve overall dealer standards, etc., just like we see in the Lexus brand. So to do this, what they really wanted to do was take the easy route out and just somehow cull the number of Hyundai dealers that could sell Genesis products. Some dealers sued in Georgia, and the dealers won because they said that this was preferential treatment within the franchise contract. Remember that dealers are independent companies that franchise the name from the car company that they're selling products for. So they're independent, completely independent entities. This control barrier is definitely a problem. So to solve this problem, Genesis decided, well, okay, we'll go to plan B. We will set up a completely separate corporation. So Genesis Motors America was born. That is a completely separate entity within the United States. It's still owned by Hyundai in Korea, but in the US, it is completely financially separate from Hyundai. And then they went out to try and sell new franchise dealer agreements. But there are a lot of hoops you have to go through to sell franchise dealer agreements. There's still some lawsuits pending, etc. Lots of drama circling around in this. Long story short is that there are a large number of key states in the US where you simply cannot buy a Genesis yet, and that includes California and Texas. So hopefully we will see Genesis dealers soon, but we don't know exactly when that will be. Now, if you wanted a Genesis, it really shouldn't be a problem to go to Arizona or Nevada as well, where you can get a Genesis at the moment. There are Genesis dealers there, and then take it back home, because if anything does need to be serviced on it, your existing Hyundai dealer that formerly sold Genesis models should be able to service it according to what we've been told. But that is still kind of a pain in the butt. Moving along here, Genesis G90 versus 2019 K900. That's an interesting question. I would K900 before I G90'd 2019 to 2019 or 2018. But the new 2020 Genesis, we haven't seen yet. It does look like it's going to have the more modern interior, a little bit more legroom, but it's going to be more expensive, and that is one of the better parts with the Kia. So I would say it also depends on how much the brand matters to you. Obviously, the Kia brand does not have any luxury pedigree, so that is the biggest problem with the K900, is that it is the car, it's the car that Lincoln should have built instead of the Continental, but it is also the Kia that's very expensive for the brand. Kind of an oddity there. Although you might get a good deal on it. Let's see here. Let's see here. When will we see the Genesis GX80? That is a good question. I'm assuming that it might have been put on the back burner because of the dealer network issues. It's going to be a little hard to bring out new products that you can't actually sell. So we might see some of the new Genesis products pushed back a little bit until the whole dealer drama has been sorted out. Do limited slip differentials improve the drivability of a car? Why don't manufacturers put LSDs in all front-wheel drive cars? It's expense. Yes, they do, but it is expense. And that's why we don't see it in very many out there. Let's see here. Thoughts on the Mitsubishi Outlander GT? The Mitsubishi Outlander GT, frankly, is probably my least favorite entry in that segment. There's just no two ways about that. It does not feel terribly modern. It's not terribly, it's not really a great value either. So I can't really think of many reasons to actually recommend that, to be honest. Why is the Volkswagen Airton taking so long to come to the USA? We were actually talking about that last week. I have no idea, and it does seem very strange that Volkswagen is dragging their feet on that one. We keep seeing it at auto shows, and then it just never goes on sale. So Who knows? Buick Encore, a good buy? Yes, actually it is. If you're looking at an Encore, it's really quite unique that it's the only thing that sits between the HRV, Trax, Renegade, etc. on the one hand, and then the luxury branded vehicles, XC40, X1, Q3, etc. And it is the only thing right there in the middle. And it's in the middle in terms of price, performance, etc. It's practical, it handles well. The turbocharged engine gives us good fuel economy. It's not as fast as the next core category up, but it's not as slow as a Honda HR-V either. And I think it's well priced. So yeah, I would definitely Buick Encore if you're looking at that. QX30 all-wheel drive reliability. That is a good question. We don't know exactly. Expect the QX30 to be possibly less reliable than the average Infiniti, but more reliable than some of the Mercedes crosses with it. Remember that the QX30 is the funky hybrid of Infiniti and Mercedes. They took Infiniti parts and Mercedes parts, they jammed them in a blender, and then poured out a QX30. So it has a Mercedes-designed engine, but it's built by Nissan in a Nissan factory. The body was designed by Infiniti, the suspension are Mercedes parts, the transmission's a Mercedes transmission, the infotainment system is a Nissan infotainment system. They just sort of jammed it all together in there. But because of that and the number of Nissan and Infiniti parts in there, it's probably going to be more reliable and less expensive than the Mercedes to care for long term. But we probably won't know for a few more years yet. Let's see here. Any word on RAV4 Hybrid? CR-V Hybrid. We don't know too much. We know that the CR-V Hybrid exists. We know that Honda has committed to electrification in the US. When it will come, we just don't know. Probably soon, though. My guess, if I had to guess, my guess would be that we would at least see it by Los Angeles Auto Show later this year, if we don't see it in New York coming up in April. Let's see here. Jeep 2-liter turbo, according to Jeep website, premium gas is recommended. Disadvantage if regular fuel is being used. Now, in general terms, remember that, generally speaking here, most engines are designed to operate safely on regular unleaded. And there is a definite difference between premium recommended and premium required. There are a few engines out there where the manufacturer says required. But if the manufacturer just says recommended, then typically the difference is going to be power levels when you're operating with regular unleaded. We always do our 0 to 60 testing on vehicles that recommend premium when they first are delivered with a tank of premium gas in the vehicle. But we always refill the vehicle with regular unleaded after we have done our testing, just to drive it around and see if there is much of a difference. And generally speaking, there isn't. And we've never, ever had a vehicle with a problem. I mean, BMW M5s, M4s, M2s, etc., AMG products, etc., they all get regular gasoline when they're here in Alex and Autos. None of them has ever, skipped a beat. Now, we do hear things like some of the M products, and actually the Volvo V70R and S60R, the older ones, you could definitely tell when the engine was changing, the engine management system was changing timing and valve advance, valve lift, etc., those profiles to compensate for the different grades of gasoline, because you can actually hear the way that they sound, and they sound differently. You'll also notice that, like in those older Volvo products, when the weather gets hot, that they'll sound a little differently. But generally speaking, they all perform quite well. So let's see here. Optima versus Camry. I would get Optima over Camry. I just like the look overall better. The Camry actually does very well when it comes to overall dynamics, and the V6 is unquestionably faster than the Optima. But I actually like the way the Optima looks better than the Camry, especially the top-end trim. Mazda Turbo 6 and Accord 2.0T, do you think they need a limited slip differential like the GTI? I would say the Accord does. The Mazda 6 Turbo is just not powerful enough to really need one. Let's see here. XC60 T5 Momentum versus Audi Q5 Prestige adaptive cruise control from a 10-year reliability perspective. Volvo, the T5 is going to be the more reliable option in that engine lineup versus the T6. Overall, long-term reliability is probably not going to be too far off. Both of them are obviously going to be less reliable than something like an Acura RDX, so I'll just throw that out right away. European vehicles tend to be less reliable than the Japanese options or the American options as well. What those reliability problems would be in the Volvo tend to be generally electrical gremlins here and there, that sort of thing. Over time, the Volvo might have some issues with spring seats. We've seen that in some Volvos before. But transmission reliability should be high in the Volvo. It uses an ISIN transmission just like Lexus's do. It uses the same transmission as a RX and an ES. The Audi, on the other hand, uses a dual clutch transmission that does require frequent fluid changes. So maintenance costs could be higher, and those could help outweigh the higher repair costs on the Volvo. So overall, after warranty repair costs may be higher on the Volvo. Actual regular maintenance costs on the Audi could be higher. They're probably going to be relatively equal in the long term there. When we finally see our CarPlay in the G90, we are told to expect that in the 2020 G90. The reason it doesn't get it now is because it uses an older software version that Genesis could not update. But the refreshed G90 will use the same infotainment software that we see in the 2019 K900. So expect Apple CarPlay in that one. Let's see here. Thoughts on the Lincoln Corsair? We talked about that earlier. I really like the latest look from Lincoln, frankly, interior, exterior. So I'm really excited about the Corsair. And I hope that the Lincoln still has a nice soft ride to it, which is what we see in the MKC. So I hope that that continues in the Corsair. I might be the only one that likes a soft ride, but hey, there we go. Nissan Titan Pro or Silverado Trail Bros. The Silverado is going to be significantly more efficient than the Nissan Titan, so I would definitely get the Silverado. Although I would actually say I would get the Sierra AT4 because I think it's prettier. Do we know when we'll drive the 2020 Subaru Legacy? We don't know exactly, but it should be here very soon. Matt's asking what is DykLaine. DykLaine is the holding company that owns Alex Autos, so that is that logo right there. 2019 Q50 Red Sport 400. We do have a video on that. I like the Q50 Red Sport a great deal, but I would say that a better deal would be the G70 3.3T if you want a luxury branded vehicle, or the Kia Stinger with the 3.3 liter T engine as well. The surprising thing is that because the Red Sport 400 does not have a limited slip differential in the rear, 0 to 60 acceleration times and initial acceleration times especially are not as good as what we see in the Genesis and the Kia with only 365 horsepower. But the G50 is still a lot of fun. The infotainment system is also a little bit behind the times, and that's my other gripe there. Skyactiv X, when will we learn more about power and power ratings in the US? Expect them to be identical to the European version, although we're told to expect a later Skyactiv version that may give us more power as well. Let's see here. What crossover SUV would you recommend for a new driver? I would say that somewhat depends on your budget, but I would definitely say get a crossover SUV with the latest active safety features. I really love them for new drivers, old drivers, etc. Having those active safety technologies that will autonomously brake for you, detect pedestrians, etc. It's an extra layer of protection. So any of the modern crop of vehicles that has those features is what I would recommend. Key ones there would be obviously the Toyota and the Honda vehicles, because they've both been incredibly aggressive at pushing all of those to their lower end vehicles. The new RAV4, for instance, has adaptive cruise control, pedestrian detection, cyclist detection, etc. in even the base trim of the RAV4. So it's a great deal, especially if you're looking at those active safety features there. Favorite car of 2018? Ooh, that's an interesting question. Favorite car, probably the BMW M5, although really not practical at all. Now that we have Prius all-wheel drive, can we expect more all-wheel drive sedans from Toyota? Probably not. The Prius was designed initially, interestingly enough, to accept the electric all-wheel drive system because it got one in Japan and other markets for a while. But we don't necessarily know if the floor stamping in some of their other hybrid vehicles was also designed for that to take place or not. So we don't know yet. Joe's asking what we think of Infiniti now and Nissan. Nissan's doing a really good job at focusing on low base prices, active safety in those low base prices. And Nissan is also doing a good job at fuel economy. I might have repeated myself there. But like if we look at things like the Nissan Kicks, very low sticker price in that segment, decent standard equipment, etc. So they're really focusing on that value component. Infiniti, on the other hand, I've been a little bit disappointed in lately. Some of their products are getting a little old. Like the Q50 is not exactly a spring chicken. It's still a good deal. Handling is good, but the technology is getting a little old. And I was a little bit disappointed that the new Q60 got exactly the same interior as the current Q50. I had hoped that that would point a different direction for Infiniti, but it didn't. And we also see Infiniti still using their older 7-speed automatic transmission. They're not upgrading to someone else's transmission. Nissan does have their captive transmission company, Jatco, so until Jatco designs a new transmission, they're probably going to still use that one. But that does put them at a little bit of a competitive disadvantage. Let's see here. Redesigned Tundra when? Don't expect a redesigned Tundra for a decent amount of time. Toyota just doesn't sell enough of them to redesign it anytime soon here. Let's see here. Nissan Armada or Ford Expedition? I would definitely Ford Expedition. The Expedition actually is really been an excellent vehicle. The diet that Ford put it on, their new engine lineup, the new 10-speed automatic transmission, it's just a great combo. And the interior is very, very nicely done as well in that one. Let's see your Outlander Sport review. We actually have an Outlander Sport review on our channel as well. Toyota Avalon or Kia Cadenza. I would get the Cadenza unless you wanted the hybrid, and if you really wanted a hybrid, then I would get the Avalon hybrid, but I like the overall style and the overall feature set that we find in the Cadenza a bit more. The Cadenza is kind of remembering that the Cadenza was designed also for other markets where Kia does not have the same brand reputation they do in America. The Cadenza was designed to compete with, theoretically, the Avalon and the Lexus both. So it slots somewhere in this nebulous region between, a little bit closer to the Avalon, but still definitely above the Avalon in some respects as far as its overall feature set and comfort level, etc. Let's see here. Telluride, Palisade, or 2020 Explorer. I am really excited by the new Explorer, and personally, I would probably Explorer because it's rear-wheel drive, and we're getting more powerful engines available. There's going to be the new plug-in hybrid, probably at some point. There's also going to be a pretty standard hybrid that does not reduce towing capacity. So I'm really excited about that new Explorer. Reliability, the Kia and the Hyundai are probably going to be considerably more reliable than that first-year Ford, but I am still excited about that. Let's moving along here. Infiniti is losing its way. They need to keep rear-wheel drive to keep their core customers. I would actually agree with that. That's part of why I'm interested to see how Genesis really plays out here with their crossovers, because Genesis, unlike Infiniti or Lexus, has committed to making all of their vehicles rear-wheel drive that we know of. So we expect all of the crossovers in the Genesis brand to be rear-wheel drive, very direct competitors to the X3, etc. Do I feel that Alpha is here to stay? I do, because they're definitely part of the FCA brand and they've got a lot of cash. So I would not bet against them. What do we think Infiniti will do with their electric vehicles? I'm not sure yet. We know that Nissan and Infiniti are probably going to be more conservative than Tesla with their electric vehicle designs, but we'll see how that goes. What is the most quiet and comfy highway cruiser for $20,000 new or used? Ooh, $20,000 is not a lot. I would probably get something like the Altima or the Accord for that. The Altima is going to be a little bit comfier, but the Accord actually is going to be a good, solid, comfortable car. And then third would probably be the Toyota Camry. Let's see here. Do you think it would be smart for GM to resurrect the Volt powertrain in an SUV? I'm not sure on that one. The Volt's eternal problem has always been that by sitting on the fence so exactly that ultimately it ends up being somewhat of a compromised vehicle. The added weight of carrying the engine around, and this goes back, let me back up a little bit. There's a lot of folks I know say, oh, I love my Volt, I never use gasoline. And I said, well, why did you buy a Volt then? Why didn't you buy a Bolt with the B? Because if you never use gasoline, you're lugging around a gasoline engine that's not doing you any good. And then on the flip side, if you can't plug in very often, you're lugging around a big battery pack that's not doing you any good. And that's why in terms of overall efficiency, the Ioniq plug-in hybrid and the Prius plug-in hybrid are a lot more efficient than the Bolt, especially in real-world driving. And in total cost of operation, driving a Prius is also less expensive than operating a Bolt, or a Volt rather. So I'm not sure if that equation would change too much if they put that in a crossover. I'm suspecting that the Volt's time may just be over within the General Motors envelope, and the technologies that the Volt allowed, however, will continue. So they probably will continue with hybrids. So we see the much more fuel-efficient hybrid in the Malibu system, for instance. 45 miles per gallon approximately in rear-wheel driving versus 35 to 38 in the Volt. And then, of course, we'll see more electric vehicles, as they've already promised, like the Bolt, which is more efficient when operating as an electric vehicle than the Volt. So I suspect that that will really be the future that we'll see there, just splitting these products off, having a more traditional hybrid and a more dedicated battery electric vehicle there. Let's see here. Do we have any idea when the RAV4 Hybrid will come in for full test? Probably the next month or so. 2020 Supra and its BMW's powertrain. I think that's actually a great blend, actually, the Toyota Supra and the BMW. Remember, as I've said before, it's not like it was a choice of having a Supra that was a 100% Toyota design and a Supra that was a BMW with the Toyota logo on it. It's maybe a little harsh on the Supra side. But it was a choice of, do you want both of them or none of them? Without Toyota's money, the Z4 would never have existed. And without the Z4 existing, the Supra would never have existed, because they just don't sell in enough volume for even a company like BMW to contemplate making another Z4 on their own. And that's also why we see Mercedes, for instance, killing off the Mercedes SL. Convertibles and Roadsters especially just don't sell in big volume. So without the other, they just would never have happened. And the BMW engine, I think, should be fine. The Supra fans wanted an inline six. There was an inline six. It makes total sense. Let's see here. Thoughts on Tiguan. The Tiguan's a solid option in that segment. It's really the only one left with a third row. So if you're looking for a small vehicle with an optional third row, there you are. Someone's asking Cher or Madonna. Clearly it would be Madonna. Q3, we probably will have a Q3 soon. What are the chances of a Skyactiv X V6? Slim to none. Mazda does not seem to be interested in making a 6-cylinder engine anymore. Let's see here. Car pricing, with cars posting $90,000 for cars, blah, blah, blah. Car pricing is always going to go up. I mean, there's inflation. Remember that, generally speaking, though, cars don't track inflation. So affordability of cars actually is not that bad in America anymore, or in America still, rather. There are many more expensive options up there, but there are still definitely affordable options for the mainstream. And we're looking at, you know, the average family sedan, which is generally the hallmark that is tracked. You can still get in an average family sedan for under $20,000 or around $20,000, depending on the manufacturer for those base trims. And that just does not keep steady with inflation. Otherwise, they'd be considerably more expensive. So I don't really think that that's too much of a problem. Do we think a M535 will be more reliable than an Audi A6? They're probably going to be fairly equal. Let's see here. Volkswagen Buzz, just a concept, or will it come to market? They've announced that there are going to be a ton of EVs coming, but they haven't said what they're going to be. So expect maybe something styled like a Buzz, but not exactly the Buzz. How long do you think it'll be before Japanese brands realize that CVTs suck? And then follow up, they do it for MPG. That is definitely true. So the real reason that we're not going to see V6s from Mazda, we're not going to see H6s from Subaru, and the reason we have CVTs and everything is simply because of fuel economy. Fuel economy regulations are not requiring them, but that is one easy way to get a few MPG out of a vehicle. And we see that transition time after time. The Accord got a huge MPG bump when it got a CVT. The new Kia Forte did. We're seeing CVTs from other brands out there. It's really just the way that we're going to continue going. especially for mainstream products. CVTs are definitely here to stay. How close is Rivian to production? We are told that Rivian will start physically producing vehicles in 2020. So theoretically, at least 12 months away. How soon, we don't know exactly. Let's see here. What used hybrid vehicle would you recommend with a family with 2 teenage children under $20,000? Your best values there might be with the Toyota or Honda family. You know, you probably would be able to find an Accord hybrid under that range with decent fuel economy. The newer, closer you get to the current model year, obviously the more efficient they're going to be. I would also say that depending on the size of everybody that you're putting in the vehicle, you could take a look at something like a Toyota Highlander hybrid. Might be tricky to find one at $20,000 though. Let's see here. Are standard transmissions going to disappear? There still seems to be a market for it, but it is definitely shrinking. So it may just end up being the optional novelty that we see in more expensive vehicles. BMW has said, for instance, that the M5 and larger vehicles, the manual is dead. But they also have claimed that the M3 and M4 will continue getting a manual. So manual take rate is not huge, but some brands are dedicated to it. Mazda, for instance, has been dedicated to bringing a manual in some form to the US in some of their vehicles, but even those options are definitely narrowing. Let's see here. Are there any 250-mile range battery electric vehicles coming to the US this year that we don't already know about? Probably not. You know, we have the Bolt, which is under that range. Just under. We have the trio of Korean options, which are around there, some over, some under. We have the Leaf, which is under, it's around 220 miles, and then we have the Tesla options, and then we have the other luxuries as well, so the e-tron, I-Pace, etc. Let's see here. Is the CX-5 best compact crossover? Does it beat the XC40? It depends on what you're after. The XC40 is a luxury vehicle. It definitely feels more European. It has better handling dynamics, I would say, than the CX-5. Definitely better grip than the CX-5. And a luxury feature set that we just don't see on the CX-5 either. But the CX-5 is a great option in the mainstream segment. So that's the differentiator there. What car SUV would you have bought for yourself in 2018? That's an easy one to answer because we bought one in 2018. I believe. I think that's about right. Yeah, we bought the Dodge Durango in 2018. So it's about right. Pilot Ridgeline 10-speed. Hopefully that will come soon, but we don't know any details yet. Let's see here. Stinger GT2, it's still a good choice at the moment. It does appear to be, and you might actually start getting good deals on the Stinger because we're told that they're no longer selling for huge markups like they were at the beginning. What car are we buying next? The next car that we are buying here might actually be a 2019 RAV4 Adventure Grade. Like I said before, we are contemplating doing a series where we buy a vehicle, review it, and then compare it against other like vehicles in its segment. So every time we brought in a crossover, whether it was a Forest or a CX-5 or whatever, we would have a segment where we compared the RAV4 against it, and then went around the office, grabbed everybody that's working here, and jammed them all in, see what they think. So we have more opinions. We haven't fleshed that thought fully out yet, but that's probably going to be the next one. And then after that, we really don't know. I'm mulling over a lot of options, but I haven't figured that out yet. I've been thinking about a Hyundai Nexo, actually, because I work in San Jose here, and so strangely enough, this office is very close to one of the only hydrogen stations here. So for my limited use case scenario, a hydrogen vehicle might be an interesting twist, and the lease price is crazy cheap. So that's that. What vehicle are we most excited about in 2019? In 2019, I would say that, let's see here, the Ford Explorer probably is going to be the one I'm most excited about, and the related Aviator. Someone's asking 2015 K900 or 2017 Cadenza. I've always liked the K900. I would probably get that one over the Cadenza if you're looking at used vehicles that way, depending on the condition of each one. K900 is a great deal used because the depreciation is epic on that one. I think it was one of the worst depreciation vehicles available in America. So if you're the person that bought it and then decided to sell it after a few years rather than leasing it, that could be bad for you. But if you're the person that's buying it as a CPO or as a used vehicle, it is a fantastic deal for you. So there we go. Let's see here. Can we please use 29-inch roller bags in our review? That's what people carry to the airport. We do not do that because I have an incredible number of 24-inch roller bags. If I pan the camera over here, you can actually see I have a huge number of 24-inch roller bags over there. And now is just not the time to be shopping for more luggage. So 24-inch roller bags it is, and we have some 22-inch roller bags, which are the carry-on size. So those are the most common forms that that we were told to use when we started asking about what common luggage roams around. And I do strangely travel all the time, as you can tell. So in airports, I do see far more 24-inch roller bags than larger ones. So that's how we ended up there. Let's see here. Would I regret buying a brand new bare bones Ascent? That is an interesting question. Really need to downsize. The question on downsizing is interesting. So remember that generally speaking, unless you're moving to, from a very inefficient vehicle to a very efficient vehicle, generally speaking, the cheapest car to own is the one you already own. So that is a tricky one. I would probably not buy the bare bones Ascent or the bare bones Rio. I would just move one step up into the next option. Let's see here. Does Kia discount their vehicles like Nissan, or are they more like Toyota? They're somewhere in between. Incentive spend at Kia is not as high as we've seen at Nissan, but lower than Toyota from the manufacturer. But remember that the dealer is the one that actually sets the purchase price on the cars. The manufacturer has a suggested retail price, but they don't actually control that final mile. They don't control that transaction there. Ease up on the ums. Sorry. Oh. You try doing a live show and see if we can get you to ease up on the ums. What's my cat's name? My cat's name is Beatrix. Can we talk about our staff and production workflow? Sure. So we have me. I am on camera. And we have our new editor starting next week. So we have a little bit of a breakup where my previous editor's last day was actually today. Our new editor is starting next Wednesday, we hope. We scheduled her for Thursday. She's probably going to start on Wednesday. She will be responsible for being behind the camera, helping out with live shows like this, being behind the camera, traveling is going to be her new function. So now we have the ability with some manufacturers to bring a videographer on location when we're actually driving vehicles for the first time. So we'll be able to do that with her. She'll be free to do that. And she will also be responsible for tackling refreshes of some of the video assets here. So hopefully over the next few months, you'll notice that we'll be having some tweaks to the logo. We'll be doing some refresh screens, some better animations, etc. And we'll also be focusing more on technology explanation videos, which some of you have asked for. So our first few videos will be on things like resale value, Honda's 2-motor hybrid system, the Volvo plug-in hybrid systems, which a lot of folks have had questions on, Acura super handling all-wheel drive, perhaps, that sort of thing. And we'll be doing more of those. And let's see here, workflow. It takes us, generally speaking, 2 to 3 weeks to actually drive the vehicle, then get the video out, because there's always this backlog of things in the way. So that may not change, may or may not change. Our target is 3 videos a week. Hopefully we will be able to expand that. Part of her function is also going to be helping us work on our non-automotive channel. So related to, well, not related to Alex Oz, totally different channel. The Mountain Garden is this strange thing where there are soap videos and rooting hardwood cutting videos and chainsaw reviews and random things like that. So we'll be doing more on that channel hopefully as well. Totally separate, not automotive related. Anyway, so that's how that works. Based off leasing and quality, are Hyundai two-row SUVs better than the Japanese ones? I would say the lease deal that you get is probably going to be the most, if you're leasing, then the lease deal is going to be more important than some of the other factors. Overall quality is very consistent between Honda and Hyundai and Kia, I would say. Toyota's interior parts quality sometimes feels a little bit behind the times, or just a hair below some of the others, likely because Toyota is really focusing on putting all of their active safety stuff standard in their base models. And there's no free lunch, as I've said before. So the more standard equipment you put in a car, you have to pull cost out somewhere else to still make a profitable car. And so it's just a matter of juggling these priorities. So if you're designing a Hyundai Santa Fe or a whatever, and you don't include some of these things in the base model, then you can spend more elsewhere, maybe on creature comforts or better seats or something like that, or better interior materials. So that's the general reason that we see some of these variances. It just is sort of the manufacturer's overall priority when designing a vehicle. But if you're leasing, then I would say styling, comfort to you, make sure you spend a lot of time in the car, and the overall deal is probably going to be the critical factor between those there. Will you be bringing back the child seat reviews? That is an interesting question. Maybe let us know back down there what you want to really see on that. What we decided to do instead, and hopefully we'll be getting back to this once the new editor comes on board and we have a little bit more assistance and time, is integrating a very quick child seat segment in each video rather than a standalone child seat video. So let me know what everybody thinks about that down there. We'll be deciding at some point. Let's see here. Would love to see you review the new Camaro SS with a 10-speed transmission. I've been interested in that as well. Unfortunately, it hasn't been around for us to actually test. So hopefully we'll see it soon, but I'm not exactly clear when that will be. Do we know why Lexus isn't releasing the UX with navigation or luxury trims, none to be found anywhere? I actually don't think that it's them not releasing them because we have seen some of them around. I think that the bigger problem is that they're the ones that everybody's buying. So they produce them in the factory, they ship them over. It takes a while to respond to fluctuating demand, and I think that the most likely reason that you're not seeing many is that Toyota and Lexus underestimated the demand for those particular options. So the first ones that came out have already been sold and spoken for, and the ones that linger on the lot are the ones that people were less interested in. So it's going to be a while till Lexus can rebalance production, then wait till those are all shipped over and are then available. Let's see here. Do you know why? Oh, that's already been answered here. BMW charging pad any good? I'm assuming you're meaning the wireless charging pad. We haven't had any problems with that, so most of those are pretty similar. What is the difference between warranties on models like Toyota, Honda, Hyundai, Ford, European auto manufacturers? The biggest difference would be that luxury car companies, and this goes for all luxury brands really, whether they're American or European, etc., they have longer warranties because that's what a luxury customer for some reason demands, and it's a selling point. So generally the bumper-to-bumper, the drivetrain warranty, etc., is a little bit longer. It typically could be 2 years. Sometimes it's only 1 year longer than a typical warranty. The average in America, generally speaking, is 3 years, 36 bumper-to-bumper with a slightly longer powertrain warranty. Hyundai and Kia have very long warranties. This is sort of a legacy thing from back when they were really struggling with quality and a brand reputation, so they were really trying to improve that, so they were really pushing long warranties as part of that process. And then once the brands actually achieved parity with the other import brands in terms of reliability, they then decided to keep the warranty as a marketing thing. The important thing to remember with Hyundai and Kia's powertrain warranty is that it is not transferable. So if you buy a Hyundai or Kia and you're the original owner, then you get the 10-year, 100,000-mile powertrain warranty. If you sell it, then it defaults to the bumper-to-bumper warranty for the next purchaser, although that warranty is still longer than what we find in Ford, FCA, General Motors, Hyundai, and Honda, and Toyota vehicles, which are generally 3 years, 36. So still a long warranty, but that segment is not transferable. So hopefully that answers your question there. Wondering if Skyactiv X will make it into the CX-9. It is unlikely because Skyactiv X at this moment in time seems to be focused on overall fuel economy and the smaller engine designs. Pardon me. Skyactiv X's purpose is to help improve overall brand fuel economy in the Mazda lineup. A small manufacturer like Mazda has troubles meeting government mandates when it comes to overall fuel economy because they don't have any hybrids or electric vehicles to help bump that number up like we do see with Honda and with Toyota. So that's the big reason we see that there. Is there a chance the 2.5-liter turbo going into the Mazda 3? Unlikely. The reason for that is corporate average fuel economy, which we've talked about before. Corporate average fuel economy disincentivizes inefficient cars. So because the corporate average fuel economy operates on a footprint scale, so the smaller the car, the higher the efficiency in order to meet the standard. The bigger the car, the lower the efficiency, generally speaking. So a Mazda 3 with a 2.5-liter turbo would be wildly uncompliant with CAFE regulations. So they would have to go to some other method of improving performance other than that 2.5-liter turbo. Let's see here. Direct injection Honda 3.5-liter V6. Any issues with carbon buildup? Not that we have seen so far. Let's see here. Stinger GT and K900, do you think they'll ever be the top in their class over German brands? K900 unlikely because it's just not in the same category. The K900 is this weird red-headed stepchild orphan thing where we have a full-on luxury vehicle that is unquestionably luxury car quality but has no brand on it. So I don't think that that's ever going to work here in the US. Volkswagen tried it with the Phaeton and to some extent with the Touareg. And in a way, Mercedes is trying it by having commercial vehicles with a luxury logo on it, but that's almost a different equation. Americans generally just don't seem to like the concept of a luxury car without a luxury brand. We don't see Chevys that are luxury cars. We don't see Fords that are luxury cars. Hasn't really been a thing here. So the closest we ever really got was a Chrysler Imperial, but it's been a long time since that model really existed the way that it used to. And I don't really see that changing for that particular car anytime soon. Thoughts on the XC90 facelift? It was a very, very minor facelift, and I'm actually surprised by that. Well, maybe I shouldn't be surprised. Volvo does tend to let cars linger a long time. So hopefully the fully redesigned XC90 will be here sooner rather than later, but the mildness of the refresh doesn't surprise too much. Volvo tends to instead go for incremental improvements. So you'll notice the T8 hybrid system isn't exactly the same since it was first launched. They tend to tinker with things year on year, change options, change colors, change grills here and there, tweak seats, doors, dashboards, that sort of thing. They prefer more gradual change than dedicated refreshes like some of the other manufacturers. Moving along here. Do we think the new B58 engine will find its way into the Supra? We're not clear what exactly the Supra's engine lineup will be over time, but I would suspect they're not going to go full-on performance like we may see sometime in BMW's line, so you should always expect it to be the less lower performing option in that duo. Also, however, the more cost-effective option. Let's see here. When we review the Kia Telluride, we will have that in March. Honda says the Korean Trio are as reliable as Toyota or very close to Toyota reliability. Oh, would you say? Yes, I would definitely say they are. The two Korean brands, Kia and Hyundai, have been very, very close to Toyota in reliability in the latest metrics. One thing to keep in mind when looking at reliability metrics is that we can't see in the future, and we also cannot really see too far behind us. We see a long way behind us. We can't see immediately behind us. So when you're looking at the long-term dependability studies from outlets like J.D. Power or Consumer Reports, they're talking about reliability in models that were sold 2015 to say 2017 or 2015, and now we're looking at them in 2018. So we're not looking at today's models, but we can see that the trend for Hyundai and Kia has definitely been in a starkly upwards direction. So predicted reliability for new models is very, very good across the board, but exactly how good we don't know yet, just like we don't know what a new Accord or a new Camry will be like in terms of reliability. But the expectation is that that direction is continuing because it has been a pretty solid march upwards there. Let's see here. Next, Toyota Highlander Hybrid mileage projections. I would guess maybe a bump of 4 or 5 miles per gallon. Any plans to release a polished video describing corporate average fuel economy? I have thought about that, and hopefully that is one of the things that we will be doing here once our new editor comes on board. Hopefully we'll have the ability to do some more videos because she will be a full-time 40-hour-a-week person, where our previous person was a part-time position. So let's see here. And our last question will be, do you think Rivian's truck or SUV will deliver on the stated specs? Sorry, last question. Yes, I actually think that they will. The reason for that is that Rivian specs really aren't that crazy. When you look at what we see from the Tesla lineup, we know that Rivian's power numbers, their performance numbers are definitely achievable. I think the bigger questions with Rivian will be, will they be able to deliver on a sales experience that matches what Tesla has done? Because Tesla's sales experience has been pretty good. Will they be able to have the efficiency that we see in Tesla's lineup? And will that matter in a way as well? Because they're going after a very different kind of shopper. They're going after a truck shopper and a big SUV shopper with the off-road capability. So even if it isn't as efficient as a Tesla, will it matter to that shopper? We don't know the answers to these questions. Also, will it have the interior that they've been showing off? Now, their PR person has been saying that it will, that this is 95+% of what we're going to see in the final product. So expect the overall shapes, designs, etc. to be consistent, interior, exterior, etc. I'm not sure whether in my head I believe that or not. I want to believe it, but I don't know if I do believe it. But I'm really hoping. So I'm very excited by the Rivian. I actually already put a deposit on, so I've said that before. We do have a deposit on a Rivian here. Hopefully I will be one of the first people with one because I really like the idea of an electric pickup truck. Good, bad, vaporware, I just don't know. We'll tell over time. So with that out of the way, I apologize for any questions that have gone unanswered, but be sure and check back with us next week because we will be doing another live show, hopefully every week. That is our plan here. All of your burning questions can be posted somewhere down there. And again, if you want to get an Alex and Auto sticker, you can do that. There are instructions down there in the comment section. And again, to do that, you send me an envelope with your address on it, stick a stamp on it, because if you don't put a stamp on it, it goes into the trash can, not into the mailbox, and then send it to us, address down there. So you fold this little envelope up, tuck it inside the other envelope, stick that in your mailbox, and then we will send you a sticker. I do apologize. Apparently some of these stickers have a logo that is ever so slightly offset, so we apologize for that. Hopefully that will be corrected soon. At any rate, stickers available down there, and I will see you all next week.